And welcome back to another episode of the Astros Future podcast here on the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Price, joined with co-host here, Kenny Van Dorn. Today, we're going to kind of take a look at the top 30 prospects. Earlier today, I released a top 30 prospects update. It also had the new interactive feature. Hopefully, you check that out. I think it's really, really cool. But so we released a top 30. We're going to kind of get into just some guys that some of the debates that me and Kenny have had internally, and then just some of the other things that we've kind of talked about. And some of the guys that jumped up a lot. But Kenny, I'll start with what I think was probably the number one debate, not just amongst us, but probably by a lot of fans, a lot of evaluators. And it really comes down to who's number one: Kevin Alvarez, Xavier, Neyens. I know me and you have gone back and forth. I had Neyens number one earlier. I ended up going with Alvarez, and that's not necessarily a knock on Neyens, but I just think what Kevin Alvarez has done at 18 years old in Single A, and he's kind of done everything you wanted to see. And he started the season a little bit slow. But man, he's really turned it on recently. 23 doubles, 9 homers, stolen some bases. Strikeouts are manageable. He's starting to draw walks at a higher clip, hitting for batting average. I think he's in the 270s right now, but that's like I think he had 2 offers the last game. He was in the 280s. Just a really good season from him. But what have you seen for Alvarez? And I know you were a proponent of him being number one as well.
Yeah, I think, Jimmy, we go back a couple months ago, and I was telling people, be hesitant. You can't expect the world from this guy. We have not seen it from an international free agent on the position player side in quite a while, where a guy comes in stateside and he's hitting the cover off the ball. He is managing to do similar stuff that he did in the DSL or even in the Florida Complex League. Heck, look at your player of the week, Wainer Luciano, who we were like raving about back in his days when he was in the Florida Complex League. It took him a couple years, and just over the past 2 months, he has really turned it around. Albeit it is year 3 or 4 now in Single A. For a guy like Kevin Alvarez, the thing that just jumps off the page, like you mentioned, managing strikeouts. His strikeout rate right now is 17.2. That's an 84th percentile. I think that's the best thing, Jimmy. I mean, you and Josh putting this together from Apollo, the sliders were probably the best thing. I've not seen this for any other prospect website, and it's a lot of fun to actually go through this and see how some of these guys stack up. Yes, you'd like to see a little bit more of an improved walk rate, but I think that's where he kind of has the edge on Xavier Neyens. And maybe one day we'll get a little bit more data on the minor league side of how many of these strikeouts Neyens has looking, and we can see that rather than just going through every game day. But he is striking out probably a little bit more looking sometimes, just because he is still honing in on his zone, and his approach is just so advanced for his age. He is in the 98th percentile for walk rate as well. But I think that's where the advantage is, in my opinion, for a guy like Alvarez, is that even at 18 years old, he is managing the strike zone better than probably anyone at the top of that level in terms of strikeouts.
Yeah, and I think I went back and looked at Kyle Tucker's numbers. He was 19 years old in Single A. Some people, I don't want to say they compared them to, but they're similar builds in terms of tall and kind of lanky at this point in their careers. And if you go back and look, Kevin Alvarez's numbers are stacked up right against Tucker, probably better. I think Tucker finished that season with 9 homers. Alvarez already has 9. Different leagues, I know, different teams, but I still think it's interesting to see just teenagers playing there. But yeah, you mentioned Neyens. He's got that promotion to high A, and he was crushing in Single A, the 14 home runs, insane walk rate, and the strikeout rate has gone up a little bit in high A. It hasn't been much. Take a look at his numbers here. He's swung at 30% of pitches in Single A. He's up to 32% in high A, but making a little less contact. Still super early there. I think when you look at those two, which I know the big debate, but I think Alvarez, and this isn't a knock on his ceiling at all, but I think he's definitely a higher floor guy. Like just based on the contact, based on the doubles power, good athlete. Neyens' potential is through the roof. It really is. If he makes a little bit more contact, like that guy, I don't know. Maybe he's a 30 or 40 home run guy at the big leagues. He's got that kind of power. So the potential is insane. But really, I was thinking about it before we recorded, and just where we're at now, like being able to just debate 2 prospects for number 1 and 2 and have a good, healthy debate over 2 top 100 prospects it's a great place to be. And someone asked me earlier, is this the best the system has looked since the cheating scandal, in 2020? And I kind of went back and looked, and it probably is 2 top 100 prospects and some of the guys that maybe are just on the outside looking in. So I'd be interested to see when Pipeline kind of re-ranks the systems, where they have them. But overall, I would say it's pretty good.
When's the last time we had a real conversation about who should be number 1? Maybe going back to 2023 at the start of the year, Hunter Brown, Yainer Diaz, maybe even behind them, in that draft, you had Drew Gilbert, Jacob Melton enter. I think Hunter Brown was no longer a prospect that season in 2023. Go back to 2022. I think Jeremy Pena really had a hold on that spot. coming into the year over Corey Lee, especially after he came back from injury in 2021. It was strong showing there. Hunter Brown right in there, Pedro Leon, Forrest Whitley. I just don't think we've had really just any chance to have this conversation, to have this debate on who's the best one. And we've seen some people jump ahead and even say Albert Fermin, which I think is a little bit of a reach. Yes, he's 17. Everyone loves his swing and his approach that he has in the DSL right now. Maybe he'll take a very similar jump to single A next year like Kevin Alvarez has. But that's going to be a guy that's probably a lot of people are going to start to think is maybe taking the same trajectory as Kevin Alvarez. And it just seems like it's a very exciting time on the farm, especially for a team that's still in playoff contention, still at the top of the American League West.
Yeah, and you bring up for me, and I think that's a good one. I think probably the success that Alvarez has had this year is leading people to be a little bit more aggressive with Fermin, hoping that he'll have that similar success. And he's a switch hitter, and I was looking at his numbers left versus righty, so hitting left-handed. He's hitting 385. He's got 4 homers at OPS of almost 1,200. I mean, just insane. Hitting right-handed against lefties, he does have 1 homer, sitting 233, and I think he's got 745 OPS batting right-handed, which really isn't terrible considering he probably hasn't seen much left-handed pitching in his career to this point. So you're right, he's been phenomenal. I got him at number 5 on the new list. So we got Alvarez 1, Neyens 2. They're pretty close. 3 and 4 went with 2 college guys, Logan Hughes, Jack Riddell. We kind of talked about it. Those guys were 11 picks apart. They're probably going to be lumped together for a few years now, and hopefully they move up together. But I think Hughes is going to be a fast riser. I know he made his debut over the weekend, had a 2-run single, little opposite field shot. Really excited to see. I will say the Woodpeckers had him at first base in his debut, and then he was supposed to play Sunday at first base. The game got rained out. Drafted as an outfielder, we'll see. But that they got him. They got him playing first base 2 games in a row. But man, yeah, you look at the top 5 with Alvarez, Neyens, Hughes, Riddell, and Fermin, and yeah, it's definitely a good spot compared to where we were maybe even a year ago.
Very safe to say that I think other people have those 2 guys in a pod moving forward too in these rankings, unless, once we get to the next update, maybe in this offseason, Jimmy, once you look at how some of these guys do. And of course, Jack Riddell hasn't even been assigned anywhere yet, so might not have a leg up. But if Logan Hughes can finish out the season strong and see single A Fayetteville, maybe there is a case that maybe those guys separate, but it's just so much easier. Like you mentioned, with being 11 picks apart, those guys will probably be together in a bunch of lists, MLB Pipeline, Baseball America, Prospects Live, whoever it is. I think you are definitely in the right camp there. And in my mind, I was talking to you about this. I think Albert Fermin is either 3rd or 5th. I just don't see a world where he's 4th right now, just because you have to have Logan Hughes and Jack Riddell more in that lump inside the top 5.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And like I said, it makes for a very intriguing top 5. Very curious to see how Pipeline's list looks when it comes out later this week. But we'll go into kind of the next crop, and I think this is where it gets interesting. Once again, we had another debate, and you have 2 right-handers drafted out of college that have had success, both in AAA now, Bryce Mayer and Ethan Pecco. And I know we kind of went over the pros and cons. Bryce Mayer's 24 years old, just now making his AAA debut. Ethan Pecco's 23. He's been in AAA since last year. I think Bryce Mayer, fastballs are probably about the same. Maybe Pecco has a little bit more velocity. All speed pitches probably favor Mayer. Both really good prospects. I know we debated it. I ended up going Bryce Mayer number 6, and then I sandwiched him and Pecco with Ethan Fry. I'm still a big believer in Ethan Fry. I think he's got a lot of potential with the bat. Got off to a little bit of a slow start in Nashville, turned it on in May, ended up getting hurt. I think he hurt his hamstring, and he came back, and he's hitting well since. 22 years old. And even his time in college was a little bit limited with the injury, but I still have a very, I think he's got very high potential. I really like what I've seen from Ethan Fry, so I didn't want to bump him down too much. But that's 6, 7, 8. I mean, that's a nice crop right there. Bryce Mayer, Ethan Fry, and Ethan Pecco.
I think it's best, Jimmy, as we go on, we can tell people this, like put these in pods. And I don't think you have future value on there, but in my mind, I think these guys are all in like the similar production level of what you're maybe hoping. And in my own, just ranking in my own head, I did have Bryce Mayer and Ethan Pecco going back to back. I see it similarly to Logan Hughes and Jack Riddell, where those guys are kind of in a similar spot. Bryce Mayer, what he did in Corpus Christi was just, heck, it just wasn't something I was really thinking that he was going to be able to pull off in year 2, and through 69 innings at 100 strikeouts. He came out like nothing was different. He got roughed up a little bit to start the year, and he just seemed like such a dominant pitcher. It's hard not to have him at 6. But I like that stretch there. I think that's, the fair order. I had Pecco above him, but I think it's pretty interchangeable between Pecco and Fry. And Talk about a very slow start for Ethan Fry. That was a guy that I said, if he stays healthy, if he's hitting it like you're supposed to, I think he's top 3 in the system, maybe even can end up at 1 and be in the back end of a top 100. But the hamstring injury really limited him. I think he's come back a lot stronger offensively. That OPS is kind of been up and down at the 800 mark, but it is over 800 now at 816 this season. He can be an advanced hitter. I'm very intrigued to see how he does in the Texas League. That's where he's going to get against some of these SEC pitchers again, maybe some guys that are his age too, that are just starting off in Double-A. And I like to see that challenge for him coming soon.
Yeah, you look at the sliders on his page here, and really the only one that shows a negative is K percentage. He's at 29%. Obviously, you'd like to see that come down, especially from a college hitter in high A at this point. But the rest look pretty solid. And if you move on after 6, 7, and 8, and then this once again you mentioned the pods, and you kind of get to the next group of where do you rank these guys? And I mean, I debated over it over and over and over. I played with the numbers trying to figure it out. It's a good group of prospects, but I'll just kind of go through my list real quick, then we'll talk about them. But number 9, I went Jason Schiavone, catcher. Number 10, I went Wes Mendez, left-hander out of Florida State, drafted this year. Number 11, Anthony Hueso, who has had a phenomenal year. And then number 12, Walker Yannick. We can kind of recap those. But 2 catchers in there. Some people debate Schiavone and Yannick. Obviously, they're the same age, both in Double-A. Both kind of provide a little bit of a similar offensive profile. Schiavone's probably a little bit more power, a little bit more patience, got a better on-base percentage. And then we know Walker Yannick is phenomenal defensively, but I think Schiavone has improved a ton. And when I talk to him, I actually have an article coming out either tomorrow or Wednesday on him. But when I talk to him, he really feels like he's made strides receiving and blocking, and his arm has been great. In Corpus Christi, he's thrown out 47% of base runners. He did give me a shout out and said a lot of that is I just put the ball around the bag, and Max Holy is so good back there. Like, he picks it, and as long as I get it close, he's getting it back there. But yeah, that's an interesting crop there. Two top catching prospects, both in Double-A, and we'll kind of see which one really stands out and takes that next step.
Yeah, this is tough because you're getting into that category of these are 3 of my favorite prospects probably the entire system. I do have Bryce Mayer up there just because I have really liked his story and where he's come as a 16th rounder. But Jason Schiavone is just obsessed with baseball. I think that's the best way to put it. Sam Nydorf told me that when he's talking about the preparation, like you mentioned, and everything he's been able to do arm-wise, they knew that was the tool that he had. It is safe to say they are still surprised by how good it has been. You're throwing out 40% of base runners at Double-A. It's gotten better as you've gone through the system. That doesn't usually happen. This guy is just addicted to baseball, and I think that's the best thing you want in a catcher. He's caught a lot of big leaguers too. I think that's something that maybe it's swept under the rug a lot in minor league baseball, is maybe talking and just highlighting some of these catchers who have done a good job. I guess success with the Astros success and recent success is pitchers coming back, and he's had guys like Blanco and these other guys come through the clubhouse, Christian Javier, the list goes on and on. They've had a lot of guys come through that clubhouse that have been beneficial. And offensively, we've seen him dip since he's been in the Texas League, since he's been with Corpus Christi, especially in the home run department. But that swing and the power kind of came out of nowhere too. He got to spring training early. He got to spring training in workouts in January. Sometimes, catchers don't really report till February. So he was a month early. I mean, like I mentioned, the guy's just addicted to baseball. I think that's the best way to put it. I've said this before, Jimmy. I don't know if you mentioned this, it's saying that this is one of my favorite terms, lunch pail guy. I can't say enough. Like the whole gym rat, like the white wide receiver. That's Jason Schiavone with the catching position. I think Wes Mendez, I've said it multiple times, and I'll take credit. I think Joe Doyle said it because I said this. I think he's the first guy that debuts from the 2026 class. He is my favorite pick in the draft. I am a sucker for a left-handed starter, and I really like to see that come up, and maybe you can have similar to the same production as Colton Gordon, which, I mean, that was good. You got innings out of a left-handed pitcher, and maybe he can be even better. Anthony Hueso, I think it could be 10, 11 there. I do like him at 11. We had talked about this. It was either him or Mendez at 10. I'm in a similar spot where, I just don't know. It feels like a toss-up to me, but he's hitting 262, 804 OPS, 3 homers, 3 stolen bases so far in high A this year since his promotion. Yes, the K rate has kind of fluctuated too, but he just consistently churns out extra base hits. And for him to still be in the system when I tapped him as a guy that, I knew that other organizations were interested in him, I think it's a good thing the Astros held on to him. And yeah, give it up for Walker Yannick right now offensively. Since he came back from an injury, he has done better. I know you've highlighted that, Jimmy, on social media. You've done a good job of tracking him in his trends offensively. we don't have to worry about him defensively. I had one scout tell me, I mean, he can be as good as a defender as a major leaguer right now. He has those tools to be a major league backstop. It is just getting him prepared for that opportunity, especially at the plate.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it brings up an interesting group there. I had a scout tell me as well that like the minute he was drafted, he was ready to be a big league catcher defensively, and that teams were potentially trying to trade for him because they wanted to trade for him and bring him up right away and have him catch and have him ready for a playoff run. We know how valuable that defensive position is. I'll talk about Anthony Hueso a little bit. Man, what a nice find. 12th rounder, a little above slot to sign him. And you mentioned that the strikeouts are a little bit of a concern, but like he just has lightning in his bat, man. It's incredible. And he's not a massive guy, but he's up to 24 doubles, 17 home runs, 33 stolen bases. You mentioned he's got a 856 or had a 846 OPS overall, 804 in high A, 262. The strikeout rate, the walk rate's been pretty much the same from single A to high A. It's only been 17 games, but he's still been able to connect on 3 homers, 20 years old. We talk about potential, you talk about the ceiling, and the ceiling for him is it's incredible. It really is. And for him to jump all the way up to number 11, it's been a heck of a jump for him. And then, Walker Yanick, turning around offensively. Obviously he's going to have to hit a little bit to get to the big leagues, but we've seen that turn a little bit. Hopefully that trend continues. So we'll kind of jump down to the next ones. Just give you a quick rundown. Number 13, Cam Durnan. Number 14, Bo Peterson. We got 2 draftees there. 15, Cole Hertzler. 16, Caden Powell. And then I'll go a couple more real quick. 17, Nick Potter. 18, Jagger Beck. We'll jump back to 13, Cam Durnan. I know we've already talked about him on our draft recap, and even Bo Peterson as well. Really like what we've seen in the scouting reports. We haven't watched him play yet. I think Durnan did have one game so far. I know you're a big fan. It's not just the Missouri thing. I know you actually like the player and what he can do. But I'm really excited for him, especially I didn't know this until I started reading about it more, but a really good defender at shortstop, a guy that can probably stick at that position. And when you start looking at who in the system are like really good defensive shortstops, you got Max Holley in Double-A, and then Cam Durnan hopefully right behind him. And if he can do what I think scouts think he can do with the bat, I think it was Joe Doyle that was talking about him maybe being a big league catcher that's hitting 15. Or I'm sorry, big league shortstop playing above average defense, hitting 15 home runs, and like that is extremely valuable. So I got him at number 13, Bo Peterson right behind him. I know there's a little debate on social media today about Bo Peterson and maybe his lack of power. I think the hit tool is above the power. He's obviously got the raw power, won the home run derby, high school home run derby. I think he still hit over 500, only struck out 5 times in his senior year. I think the power is there. It's just about tapping into it into the game now. But at that stage, give me the raw power and the advanced hit tool versus, the power that's showing up, but you're striking out a lot. I like what I've seen from Bo Peterson and what I've read about him, but man, super excited about those 2 guys.
Goes back to what you said during the draft, Jimmy, when you texted me about, hey, they're taking guys that don't strike out a lot. I'm not worried about the Bo Peterson power. I know there's that debate, and I know you were talking to people about it, Jimmy, but it's just at this point too, where it's like, there's no reason to worry. I mean, the guy hasn't even played an inning of professional baseball. I'm sure he's been in the Bridge League right now, but that's not recorded anywhere publicly. I think something that's going positive for Bo Peterson, he's 6 foot, 395 pounds as a 19-year-old, just his first cup of coffee, being around a pro complex. I think he's got the size already. It's just now just maintaining that size and getting him through the system while those tools develop. I know he made a lot of money. I know that they spent a lot to pull him away from his Texas commitment. Say if you think that's worth it or not. No one's going to be asking for his ID out there. Yes, he's already 19 years old, as a high school draftee, and he got over $3 million. Yep. I'm still looking forward to how Bo Peterson does. I think he's just a very exciting prospect with his tools. He was a fun one to follow these last couple of years. I remember watching him actually in that home run derby too, just on the pipeline stuff and watching those videos. But I just don't think it's worth really even argue with anyone about him right now. With Cam Durnan, though, I learned this in the last couple of days. I talked to Freddie Perez, who's the lower Midwest scout for the Astros, and he signed all those Missouri guys. They were on him since March, which is kind of funny because I didn't really know too much about him until the months leading into the draft. And, to be honest, I don't follow too much Missouri baseball. There hasn't been much success, but he's someone that found success in that transfer. And the more people we talk to, Jimmy, the more it is, the hype has gone up. I understand now why his stock just kept rising as a 4th rounder. And Joe Doyle, and even Freddie Perez thought that he could possibly be a 2nd rounder, Jimmy. So there were definitely camps that saw him better than a 4th rounder, which definitely came off as a surprise to me. considering he wasn't even ranked by Pipeline and maybe some others as well. He just hadn't fallen into those top 25 lists. I think there's a little bit of reliever risk with Cole Hertzler, but I mean, heck, you got to give it to him this year. He's having a very strong season at AA, 2.48 ERA in 29 innings. Strikeouts are down. I think that's the one thing that's maybe been the one thorn since his promotion from high A. Caden Powell, got to give it to him too. Power got zapped with that wrist injury, the hand injury. He's come back. He's hitting the ball well. Moved to the outfield too. He's a very versatile, athletic guy. Nick Potter, Yager Beck. Those are two very underrated arms in the system. I know Nick Potter. I can say both of them were probably garnering attention from outside organizations during the trade deadline. And then Keon Johnson, just another 19 or 18-year-old guy from the draft that you have just no reason but to be excited about. You just have no idea what's going to happen. I could definitely see him maybe starting next year in the complex league, then getting that promotion. But we'll see how that goes in these next couple of months and see if he can get a leg up and be in Fayetteville next year.
Yeah, I'll jump back down to Caden Powell. And, I really like what I've seen from him. Obviously, we know he's got pretty big tools and crushed it at the JUCO level. I did talk with a scout when I was just kind of, hey, give me somebody who you think is underrated in the Astros system, and Caden Powell was the name. And he's hitting 280 in Asheville. I know it's a hitter's park, 12 homers, 28 stolen bases. Nice to see. You mentioned that transition to the outfield, and without watching every single game and every single rep, I would say that the little bit that I saw of him, it looked like the transition was going well. You look at the sliders on the Prospects Savant inspired page here, and most of them are all good. The only one that's a little bit down is the K percentage, and then the isolated power, which a lot of that really had to do probably with like April and part of May when he was still working that power back after that hand injury. But yeah, the next group of pitchers right there, Nick Potter. I really like Nick Potter. I really like what we've seen from Nick Potter. Running up to 98 miles per hour. He's got a really good slider. He's added a curveball, working on other stuff. Like, worst case scenario, the guy's probably an electric reliever, and he's kind of got that swagger on the mound to be a good reliever. But best case scenario, the guy's developing extra pitches, and he's turned into a legit prospect. And then Jagger Beck, 19 years old, 6'6". We've talked about him before. He's running up to 96, doing everything that you want to see from a young high school undrafted free agent. And then we'll round that out the number 19 with Keon Johnson. And I think, you look at Bo Peterson and you maybe look at the ceiling of, oh man, what could this guy be if he gets the power? And Keon Johnson feels like a guy who just does everything well. Maybe not a standout tool necessarily, but just does everything across the board well. So super excited to see what the Astros can do with him. We'll jump down into the 20s, Kenny. We're kind of getting towards the end here. I got Will Bush, number 20, which, like, Will's had a good season in AA, and he plays a little bit of catcher. You got three catchers there, Schiavone, Yannick, and Bush, and they basically rotate DH, first base, and catcher every night. And he's had a good season in AA. And then a little after that, you got another catcher that's kind of flying up the ranks, Luis De Leon. He's in single A now. Had some really good numbers in the FCL. And then a couple outfielders that are on the injured list, unfortunately, Joseph Sullivan in AA, and then Neomar Ochoa, who was having a phenomenal year, ended up getting injured, sliding into home, kind of freak injury, broke his finger. But yeah, I mean, it's, once again, we're down in the 20s, and I'm still looking at some of these guys and like, man, they're having good seasons. They're good prospects, but the depth of the system has kind of forced them down a little bit.
Most definitely. And, for Neymar, I think he might have had an argument to probably jump back into the 20s if he had a full season, if he hadn't, just, it was such a freak injury. It's a terrible injury for a guy who's already been through it all. With Will Bush, I was talking to the minor league field coordinator, Michael Thomas, about this, Jimmy. There are three quality catchers in AA, and the Astros knew this was going to happen eventually. And I asked Michael Thomas, how do you get these guys in the field? And he said, if you have the answer, let us know, joking, saying that just because they have three guys and two of them are very, they're defensive savants back there. If I rank them in order, I think it's easier to say it's Walker Yannick, Jason Schiavone, and then Will Bush. And Will Bush is very athletic to play first. We've seen him be able to stretch and play that position. It's hard to, want Schiavone to play more first base because that arm is just so good. I think it's a 70 grade by some, and just his best tool outright. But with Will Bush, he just continues to stick around. And I think we've seen this. I forgot who pointed it out to me. Someone pointed out that the Astros do a good job about drafting on character as well. Those intangibles of, just who you are as a person. Will Bush seems like a guy that everyone loves too. And I think talking to him as well, that he's been on the show before, and we had a good time with him. I think he's a good character. He's still a young guy. He's 22, and I think he's just going to move up the system just fine. Probably carve out a role as a utility guy, being able to play catcher first. Add some power from the left side too.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that your top three catching prospects all ended up in the same level at the same time, and the Astros probably didn't plan that. The Yannick injury slowed him down a little bit, and then Schiavone just having a breakout kind of forced him up a little bit, and boom, they're all in Double A. But yeah, it's fun to watch because every night it's a different catcher. They all bring a little something different to the table. Going a little bit further down in the list now, we'll jump down to kind of the final 6 or 7 here. Uh, I think is his last name pronounced Friday?
I think so.
I've seen him kind of joke about it.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard it enough to know for sure. But Juan Friday, young pitcher, 20 years old, made it up to high A. He's to me, and I think I sent it to you when he looks like Lance McCullers on the mound, just kind of with the way. I'm not comparing the pitches or anything, but just kind of, he's not a big guy, but the kind of way he moves, and he does throw about 96. I think he's maybe 6 foot, 185 pounds, not a big guy at all, but
less than that. Yeah.
Is he?
Yeah, he's 161. And I think you kind of see that too. The jersey's huge on him.
161. Yeah, he's still got some time to add some weight, hopefully. But his numbers have been good since he's been in single A. He's striking out. So he's got 48 strikeouts in 42 innings, a 3.38 ERA, pretty solid. And once again, the sliders are all in red pretty much. But then you got Jackson Nizu, 24 years old, made it up to AAA. I think if you look at the overall numbers, they probably don't look as good, but the strikeouts are there, the swing and miss is there. Like, I think he's a guy who's probably going to get a cup of coffee at the big league level at some point, or whether it be a starter role or maybe in relief. And then just kind of rounding out the top 30, Jace Mitchell, a 19-year-old catcher drafted last year. Pentecost was a guy we were excited about, looked really good at the beginning of the season, got hurt. Adrian Ardinas is another one who, 19 years old, another international signing that performed really well in the FCL, kind of carried them to the championship, and he's now up in single A. Justin Thomas Jr., outfielder number 29, drafted in the 11th round last year. I really like what I've seen from him. And, he's kind of, I remember I went back and looked at my interview. He told me he played. If I said, if you weren't playing baseball, what would you be doing? He's like, oh, football for sure. And I said, what do you play? And he said, cornerback and slot receiver. That fits. He's 5'9", 195 pounds, really well built, really good speed in the outfield, speed on the bases. I think he's got over 30 stolen bases, but he got some pop too, 14 homers. So I really felt like I wanted to get him there. And then rounding it out, number 30, I had Alonzo Treadwell. And that's a tough one because, man, he was so good last year when he was healthy. And then unfortunately the health has just not worked out for him this year. I know he's pitching. We've seen some pictures of him pitching over in the complex, not in the actual games, but in against other teams. So I know his arm is healthy enough. He's actually out there throwing. He just hasn't made it up back to Double A yet. But that kind of rounds out the top 30. And man, those last 2 or 3 were tough. Like I played with it a little bit. There's a few guys. Juan Sierra I thought deserved some attention. Max Holy, James Hicks, Javier Perez, Yamal Encarnacion, Trevor Austin. I'm looking at all of my honorable mention guys. Even Josh Wakefield, I kind of played with him thinking, he's had a really good season. Speedy left-handed hitter, doesn't strike out a ton, stealing a lot of bases, showing a little bit of improved power actually compared to where he was at in college. Man, it was tough to narrow it down to 30. But Kenny, I'll just let you give some thoughts there on the last 6 or 7 guys.
Yeah, it's funny you point out the Alonzo Treadwell. The reason that way we found out that he was playing in the Bridge League right now is that Trevor Condon, who's the 13th overall pick, hit a home run off of him, the Cardinals prospect.
See, I looked at it and I was like, yes, he's healthy, he's pitching. I gave up the homer.
I was like, oh yeah, gave it up to the next PCA. Yeah. They need to make an anomaly team, just this year, just on guys that have just done really weird numbers. Jace Mitchell, I want to know more about it, how he pulled this off. 100 percentile on walk rate, 33.8. The guy didn't hit a home run this year while he was in the complex. He hit 168 with a 730 OPS. And that's in part to just that on-base percentage. I mean, that's just, what he was doing this year. He was walking at an insane rate. It's hard to just point out the percentiles and, say wow, look at this walk rate. Well, he didn't really hit the ball that hard. He didn't really do much there, but even talking to Brandon Van Horn, who's now the hitting coach at Missouri, and he was hitting coach down there in the Florida Complex League until mid to late June. I just got him laughing, just asking about Jace Mitchell. It's like, yeah, just the guy has an insane approach and what he can do. As he moves up, I'm intrigued to see how he looks as a defender and as a receiver and how he's throwing the ball too. But that's a pretty incredible approach that he has, and maybe it does kind of translate to his ability to call games as well if he can manage his zone that well.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. I don't think we've seen anything like it. I think early on, hitting 168 with a 730 OPS, like you mentioned, a 33% walk rate is really good to see. I wish we had more data, and it's just lower minors, you don't get it. But on how hard he's hitting the ball, did he hit some balls hard? Was he, obviously the batting average on ball in play is 304. It's not super high. It's not super low either. So you can't really say he had completely bad luck. But 19 years old, first chance at pro ball, and we've seen a lot worse. And he's drawing walks. The strikeouts were reasonable. They were manageable. I think it was 29%, which is not low, but it's lower than his walk rate. Drew more walks than strikeouts. So yeah, really interesting to see from him. And then moving on, Kenny, I know you like Pentecost to start the season. He was kind of a pick. Maybe some people thought might be the next like Bryce Mayer or Ethan Pecco, the guy that was kind of came out of nowhere, won minor league pitcher of the year, and then boom, has the injury. I think 4 starts into the season.
I'll say real quick, I've never seen anything like this too. I didn't even notice it. Do you know how many hits Chase Mitchell had this year?
How many?
17. And he had 54 walks. I don't think I've ever seen
that's insane.
Such a difference in comparison there. Maybe we can try to get a hold of Chase Mitchell this offseason just to talk about it. Pentecost was a name that just kept popping up at the beginning of the year when I was kind of getting feedback on top 30s and what that would look like for the Astros. Talking to scouts, it's like 6th rounder. He falls into that category too, of like the AJ Blue Balls and the recent Ethan Peckos, that 5 to 6 round range. The Astros have been able to find pitchers, not necessarily from big time schools, that have been able to move up. We still got to give credit to Bryce Mayer that he called it. I think Cole Hertzler probably has the award right now, wouldn't you say, unless Bryce Mayer will go back to back. But Bryce Mayer said that he thought Cole Hertzler would be the next Astros minor league pitcher of the year. But yeah, I think from those final ones, it makes the most sense to me. My only question for you, Jimmy, just looking down at these honorable mentions, were you close at all of having Lucas Spence, Miguel Uola, Limber Santa in there as well? Just, I know you don't have any MLB debut guys on there. I was just wondering where your mind kind of goes at this point in the top 30.
I try to keep the MLB debut guys out, and obviously all 3 of them are still prospect eligible. But I just think, like, once you kind of get that, once they're up there, it's like, all right, they're still, I get it. They're still rookies. They're still prospects, but I leave them out for, hey, we're going to rank guys that are in the minor leagues that don't have any MLB time. So yeah, I have them down in the honorable mention, but it's not because I think they're outside the top 30. I didn't rank them based on their MLB time.
Makes sense. With the guy like Lucas Spence, I wanted to give you this quote because I did get it from Freddie Perez. It's also, I think we mentioned Lucas Spence was the first guy from the 2024 class to debut, but he said you have to tear the cleats off his feet to get him to stop playing baseball. I think that's what you like in a UDFA, especially one that debuts in the big leagues.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, I think, a little bit because, like, he was doing okay in AA, got really hot, got promoted to AAA, was doing pretty decent, but didn't have a ton of time there, and then he gets called up. And I don't know if it was a rush call up. Obviously, they were looking for some kind of spark, probably similar to the Zach Cole spark they got last year. So I don't want him to lose his prospect shine. Hopefully, he goes back down to AAA, kind of keeps it going well, and he's not like. And that's the problem is sometimes these guys get called up once, it doesn't go well, they get sent back down, and then it's like, oh, well, they're a failure. Well, it takes time. If the Astros, everyone talks about, I think Bregman's first like 20 games, he hit like 150 or something. It was not good, so it takes time. But Kenny, is there anybody else in that honorable mention group there? I put a ton of them. Obviously, it's not every single prospect in the system, but it's a lot. But is there anybody else in that group that you kind of look at outside of the MLB guys that you think could be in a top 30 or right there behind that top 30?
Yeah, I think if Juan Sierra kind of picked it up a little bit more offensively, definitely could lump him into there. I've always liked the swing, even going back to when he signed 2 or 3 years ago now. Max Holley offensively started to dip a lot more, but I think he is the best defender, most certainly infielder defensively in the entire system. And that's just another UDFA. That's a Jim Stevenson special. Javier Perez was one that I kept, kind of looking at. ERA at 3.5 in his career. But at single A this year, it's at 4.23, but he's 103 strikeouts at 89 and third innings. He's been able to pitch deep into outings. That whip is at 1.02, which is very strong. I think the Astros have done well recently. You look at him and Friday. They've got some good arms from Mexico coming up, and we know the success that they have with Jose Urquidy. These are 2 other guys, from our neighbors down south that are producing at this level at single A and high A now.
Yeah, and Perez was phenomenal to start the season. Kind of slowed down a little bit, giving up some homers. Just got to high A, and actually him and Nick Potter both made their debuts in the same game on different days. It took 3 days to finish that game. They started the game, I think, on Friday, and Potter got 1 inning, and then they went on Saturday. They tried to play the game again. I think Javier Perez got an inning and a third. It got rained out again, and they finally finished it on Sunday. But I'll go down a little bit further, and a couple that I'll shout out before we kind of end the pod here. But Yamal Encarnacion, and I don't know if he'll ever end up on a top 30, but man, there's just me and you have talked. I love the guys that are smaller. He's a switch hitter, makes a lot of contact, steals a lot of bases. We've seen him bunt for hits. He's kind of like that old school kind of player. Looking at his sliders here, he's in the 99th percentile for stolen bases. He's got 48 stolen bases, which leads the Astros system for full season. I think Sebastian Mendez might have 48 as well in the Dominican Summer League, but he's hitting 266. Doesn't have a ton of homers. He's got a ton of power. He's got 5 homers, but the 48 stolen bases. Gets on base a little bit. The strikeouts are manageable. Man, just kind of a fun prospect. Plays second base, plays shorts, or plays center field, a little bit of right field. So wanted to give him a shout out before we end. But I guess last thing I got for you, Kenny, you mentioned a few on there. Anyone else that you wanted to give a shout out to that didn't make the top 30?
I would say Anthony Milan. He was someone in the back end at certain parts. We know he started on the injured list to start the year, but at the rookie level, in 2026 in the Dominican Summer League, second year there, made it into 37 games, hit 259, OPS around 832, 3 homers, 19 stolen bases. I think he's going to be someone that we'll continue to talk about once he gets stateside in the next year.
All right, well, that sounds good. That's going to do it for the episode, y'all. If you can, leave us a review. I say it every time. Leave us some comments on YouTube. Give us 5 stars. Check out astrosfuture.com, the new top 30, but also the interactive top 30. You can create your own. You can share it with an image, a link. You can see all the sliders, the stats. Really cool. Shout out to Josh Hill with Apollo for putting that together. Man, phenomenal work. The guy's a genius. So love it. Fans love it. Be sure you check that out. But as always, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Astros Future podcast, covering your Astros in the minor league system.